We're recording?
Huh?
We're live. Sorry.
What?
We're live now. Sorry.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Audit Committee meeting being conducted by Zoom for December 9th, 2020. And I'd like to call upon the secretary to take a roll call.
Our private members, Michael Spitzer, Chair.
Present.
Larry Nangelo.
Present.
Bud Larson.
Present.
Public members, representing Mayor Bill de Blasio, Raymond Lee.
Present.
Representing Comptroller Scott Stringer, Jacqueline Thompson.
Present.
Representing Public Advocate Jamoni Williams, Michael Toomey.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to have a motion to accept the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on November 24th, 2020.
So moved.
Thank you. Without further ado, I'd like to start the meeting by calling on representatives of the Brooklyn Public Library. I don't know who you are looking at the screen. So, please step forward, introduce yourself and anybody that you recognize on the screen.
Good morning. Good morning. Hi. Thank you, Michael. My name is Karen Sheehan. I am the Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration at the Brooklyn Public Library. And I am joined by Eldine Wilson and Candace Meth from our auditing firm, Eisner Amper.
Thank you. Would you like to make some opening remarks, please?
Sure. Happy to. So thanks to the contribution of the City of New York, the Brooklyn Public Library continues to play an integral role in the lives of Brooklynites. Like the rest of the state and the region, we were forced to close our doors for much of the spring due to the COVID-19 pandemic. After closing on March 15th, BPL quickly pivoted to essentially a virtual library, working remotely and maximizing our digital and virtual offerings. We dramatically expanded our digital collection, which now contains 400,000 ebooks, audiobooks, videos, and subscriptions. In all of FY20, Brooklyn Public Library circulation, including print and electronic media, totaled over 8.7 million items. BPL also had 8.6 million visits to our website and responded to 4.2 million electronic reference inquiries. As the borough's largest provider of free computer and internet access, BPL hosted 1 million computer sessions in FY20. Though computers were not accessible while our branch was closed, we continued to provide Wi-Fi from our buildings, with almost 1.3 million sessions in FY20. Also, the library hosted almost 50,000 in-person and virtual programs attended by almost 1.2 million people in FY20. Prior to closure last spring, our branches hosted a total of 5.3 million visits as measured by door count. We cannot wait to welcome Brooklynites back into our physical locations, and we're working hard to keep them in a state of good repair. However, BPL's facilities have significant deferred maintenance needs. To address these needs, the library partnered with the city to undertake some major renovations as self-managed projects, which started with a $23 million renovation of the Greenpoint Library branch, which was just completed this fall. We're also nearing completion of a $38 million renovation to the Central Library, and our efforts will continue with the Brooklyn Heights and Sunset Park libraries, both of which are going to be redeveloped as mixed-use facilities. Our auditors, Eisner Amper, issued an unmodified opinion of our financial statement for the year ending June 30th, 2020, and a comparison for June 30th, 2019. I can continue and summarize the financial position if that makes sense. Yes? Okay, great. So as of June 30th, 2020, Brooklyn Public Library had total assets of $174.4 million, up approximately $23.3 million from FY19. Our year-end balance of cash and cash equivalents increased by $12.4 million over FY19 due to a refund in operating cash at the closing of our TD Bank line of credit facility. Our restricted cash and segregated accounts increased by $14.3 million from FY19 due to a maturity of corporate bonds timed to meet the construction schedule of our Brooklyn Heights and Sunset Park branches. BPL's receivables increased by $4.9 million from FY19, primarily due to a $1.9 million increase in uncollected receivables from the city capital pass-through grants, $1.9 million increase in miscellaneous receivables due from the CARES Act employee retention credit, and $900,000 from the state of New York. As of June 30th, 2020, the balance outstanding from the city pass-through grant projects was $3.7 million for the Greenpoint project and $9.8 million for the Central Library renovation. Our investments decreased by $21.1 million from FY19, primarily due to the maturation of those corporate bonds that I mentioned earlier, which were not renewed, as well as a $1.6 million fall in market value of our portfolio due to market conditions. Property and equipment increased by approximately $13 million over last year, primarily due to the cost of various construction-related projects. Accounts payable and accrued expenses increased by $5.1 million because of the timing of year-end invoices, including construction-related bills for Greenpoint and Central Library. Net borrowing from our TD Bank line of credit was approximately $4.4 million. Accrued wages and related liability increased by $6.4 million from FY19, and this was largely a large part due to $2.6 million increase in our terminal leave obligations and $1.7 million increase in our accrued vacation value. Total net assets increased by $3.8 million over FY19. Total operating revenues and support in FY20 was $185.7 million, up $6 million from last year. This increase is primarily due to the net impact of the following. City support totaled $126.7 million, up $6.2 million from the prior year, mainly due to the impact of additional funding for operations, health insurance, and collective bargaining settlements. Federal revenue decreased by approximately $250,000 from last year due to the COVID-related closure. And total operating contributions decreased by $1.2 million from the prior year due to the non-recurrence of the Stavros Niarchos Foundation contribution that we received in FY19. Total operating expenses increased by $4.2 million from $179.9 million in FY19, mainly due to salaries and related expenses increased by $5.1 million because of the increase in terminal leave obligations and year-end vacation accruals. Professional fees were down approximately $1 million from FY19, but books and materials spending was up by $1.8 million. Non-operating activities in FY20 included grants and contributions for our capital program totaling $20 million, including $2.3 million from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for the Greenpoint Library and $18 million from the New York City Capital Grant Program for the Greenpoint and Central Library projects. Our investment income not used for operations returned a shortfall of approximately $1 million. That is a summary of our financial position for FY20. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
One big question, basically, I guess, because of what's going on in the world today, how is COVID going to affect you for FY21?
That's the
in this, let's say because of revenues.
Sure. On a couple of fronts, just sort of starting with what we know already. We collect revenue through fines and fees. Typically, that gets applied to our collections budget. We have suspended the collection of fines and fees since closure, and that suspension is both sort of is out of an operational necessity, We have 250,000 pieces of materials circulating in Brooklyn right now, where we had 250,000 pieces of materials circulating in Brooklyn when we closed our system. So clearly we couldn't continue to accrue fines on those materials while we were not giving folks an opportunity to return them. We also as we build back up the library services over the last 6 months, it's not it would be logistically challenging for us to turn those fines and fees on, putting aside any policy discussion around going fine free. So we already know, and then in addition to that, our circulation is down. So we're going to have an impact to our revenue going into FY21 by the loss of that fines and fees revenue. The loss is probably about it's less than $1 million. We'd probably estimate it at about $800,000. We're still depending on if we renew fines, begin charging fines and fees again. And also just sort of the general decrease in circulation would impact what sort of revenue we receive from that. That plus we actually operate 3 passport offices throughout Brooklyn. And that is also another source of revenue that we have basically suspend an operation that brings in about $1 million in revenue a year that has been suspended since March 15th. We do plan on reopening our passport offices. However, we will not reopen. We have not opened our branches for patron services. So when we do begin to welcome Brooklynites back into our buildings, we will then begin passport services. So it's unclear right now what the full impact of the closure of passport services will be on our revenue condition, but in a typical year we bring in approximately $800 to $1 million in passport revenue. And then, of course, we rely on the City of New York for a significant operating subsidy. And of course, we are about to go into the preliminary budget and executive budget process, and we'll work closely with OMB to hopefully hold on to our subsidy in full.
Thank you. I just, Katrina, I don't know if you saw that Mark came in.
Yes, Mark is here.
I'm here. Sorry, I troubled my equipment.
Karen, just because I don't know everybody's and their affiliations, could you just identify for the record who is here possibly joining you from the Brooklyn Public Library and your auditors?
Sure. So I'm flying solo from the Brooklyn Public Library. My co-pilot usually is the VP for Finance, Amadou Wagi, but he is not able to join us this morning. But I am joined by Candace Meth and Eldine Wilson from Eisner Amper.
Thank you. I don't know if the auditors have anything to add to Karen's presentation.
Actually, could I ask a question? You did the revenue side of COVID. What's the expense impact of COVID?
Okay. The expense impact, we were fortunate. We were positioned, at least on the technology side, we were well positioned to move to a largely remote workforce. We had the equipment and software available. Thankfully we did not incur a significant expense on that front. We do have expenses associated with personal protective equipment, purchasing masks and gloves, and the additional cleaning supplies that all of us went out and purchased and are using in a rapid pace. In addition to that, we have modified some of our workplaces with the installation of plexiglass and some additional barriers to assist with social distancing. That being said, we have savings. We are a place where folks come to print and use copy machines and that sort of stuff. Those traditional office supplies. We are not incurring those expenses. There were other projects on the capital on the facilities maintenance and operations front that have been deferred or canceled in total. So while we have had an increase in some expenses, they are offset by some operational savings in other areas.
Have you been maintaining full staff?
Excuse me?
Have you been maintaining full staff through this?
Yes. So we've maintained full staff, but for our passport operations crew, and that totaled about 18 positions. That group was furloughed. Our part-timers are receiving significantly less hours than they had previously been scheduled for. So there is some reduction in the hourly employee cost. We are not hiring as we normally would, but we have not moved to and implemented any reduction in force.
Thank you.
I
had a couple of questions. Is that am I my mute is off, right?
I hear you.
Okay, good. How you doing, Karen?
Good. It's nice to see you.
Just a lot of this is just my own curiosity. On page 18, there's a terminal leave number that's highlighted in yellow. Is that just a typo to be fixed, or did you want to draw attention to it?
No, I don't think there was nothing special about that. I ask if Eldine or Candace recall why that's highlighted, but
it's not highlighted in my version.
Oh, that's interesting, because in my version, it's 11611 highlighted.
It's on page 18 and it's highlighted. I had the same question.
Yeah, like what? But okay, so obviously it's just something left over from whatever the version control. Okay. My next question is, I read in there that it's the policy of the library to sell donated securities immediately. I'm just curious as to why.
Because we
that's a policy that lots of not-for-profits have for donated securities.
Yeah, so we want to achieve the value as the donor intended. So if we delay that in any way, we run the risk of the value decreasing. That's really the risk. If it increases, that would be great, but.
I sit on a number of charitable boards, and every one of them does exactly that.
Yeah. Okay. Just my curiosity. Another just curious question. You mentioned litigation at some point. Are you guys covered under the city's judgment and claims or not?
We largely not.
Largely not.
Yeah. I'd have to get into the specific. I'd have to look deeper, but that is my understanding.
A couple more, just bear with me. You said you were managing some of your own capital projects now. You had two of them instead of DTC. How is it going?
Yeah. So we have quite a few. I highlighted a handful of them. We think that our experience thus far has been we've brought the Greenpoint Library and our Capitol Library renovation phase 1. Both of those are our first two capital self-managed projects that we basically manage from beginning to end. We think we think it's a good model for select projects. We are not in the construction business. We are in the library business. But we do think that for select projects, we are able to, and we have been able to deliver the projects as they are intended, on time and within budget. We continue the Brooklyn Heights project that actually received a lot of publicity a couple of years ago. There was a sale of that building, and now it's a mixed-use facility with market rate properties, condos on the upper floors, and our library and a Department of Education center on the ground floor. In addition to that, we have the Sunset Park project, which is an affordable housing project. So self-managing these projects has allowed us to be creative in our partnerships and looking for new ways to meet the needs of Brooklynites. We'd like to continue to do them. We have several in the pipeline that are being designed right now. But like I said, we really value our relationship with DDC, and certainly they are the experts in construction. But we'd like to continue to do some self-managed projects as we go forward.
Having this experience, would you guys ever think of sort of doing a report on the pros and the cons? Because obviously there are things that work better, and there are probably things that don't work as well. Would you ever consider doing that? Because I know a lot of culturals would like to see that happen.
Yeah, we've participated. Actually, just earlier this fall, the Center for Urban Future has been noodling around in this area. And they've asked us I think they're actually issuing a report on this topic. So we contributed to that, and I participated in a virtual conference about self-managed projects. And so, yeah, we're very happy to, and we're a library. We like to share information. So we absolutely would be interested in doing something like that. And I'll talk to my strategy team about maybe doing something that says lessons learned and opportunities project. That would be great.
That's my last question. There's a lot of obviously the city is going to have to figure out a way to vaccinate a huge number of people, right? And or hopefully it's a huge number of people, but there's a lot of mistrust out there in terms of vaccination and whatnot. Could you possibly envision a role for some of your neighborhood branches, especially playing some role in just kind of being open to have Department of Health come in and use the facility to vaccinate? You can give them library cards as well. Yeah,
100%. And to that end, we are working with the Department of Health now to support the test and trace groups. And so we received a grant from the Department of Health in FY21, where we are active. We are ambassadors of test and trace, and pushing out trusted COVID-19 information to the community. And we see that role growing as we get closer to the vaccine distribution. In addition to that, we've turned over a couple of our branches in some of the red zones to the Test and Trace Corp, and they're using those our libraries as basically home base. But going forward, we will come to any conversation about partnership on this front. from a position of yes, let's talk, let's figure out how to get it done.
Because you are just trusted in a lot of those communities. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I go now?
Sure, Mark.
Yes, you
Go
can.
for it.
Okay, several things. First of all, and I don't know the order I have them. You have the accrued terminal leave obligations. Do you participate in OPEB?
I apologize. I'm not familiar with that.
Other post-employment benefits, such as health insurance for retired people, health insurance,
Oh.
or the reimbursement of Medicare.
So we participate in the city's health insurance program, and I believe, the city's health insurance program and the state's retirement program. So I believe the post-employment benefits are covered under one of those programs.
I just wonder why the OPEB is a huge liability for the city, and you have your share of it, presumably, which the city pays. And there's no mention of that sort of thing in the Note H, whether that's something that should be looked at.
Unless Eldine or Candace have an insight into that, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to get back to you when Amadou is available.
All right, now I'll go on to some other stuff. Some of it's more important than others.
Basically, for that, in your note on post-employment benefits, you're on what's called a pay-go. You're just paying as you go. What Mark is alluding to is the city has a liability, $100 billion.
Right.
So he's basically looking for your carved out piece for to be included in your financials.
If I could just jump into this conversation, as this
Thank you, Michael.
last year with Queens Public Library when this question was posed to us, and we spent some considerable research with OMB, Labor Relations, as well as the Comptroller's Office. I received an email a few days ago, basically where the Comptroller Office of Actuary had many meetings about this with participating agencies and entities, did not get a conclusive answer. So it sounds like something that's in the works. So, we're held hostage with this. So once we get more information, we'll be able to update our financials accordingly on this matter. Thank you.
Okay, that's one.
Thank you so much, Michael. I know you.
My pleasure to help.
First off, that question for the Queens Public Library.
One of the things, Mike, that I was looking at is why every one of these institutions we look at, which is a subset of the city, doesn't have the same disclosures about COVID. Why is in one language you push a button and it's available to all these participating institutions, so that it's all the same for each. I noticed that the Queens Library is a little different in its description, and that there's no need for creative writing when there ought to be one source.
I agree with you, and we'd be happy to comply once we get the proper marching orders.
Well, it's not your issue, but I urge the Comptroller's Office to look at coming out with something that says, here's the COVID, hopefully won't need it much longer, description to use. Let me go on then. On page 15, you refer to hedge fund. It's a singular fund. And then you say this investment, first of all, it says this investments. So somehow there's a mistake in grammar there. Mm-hmm. and prepared by the respective investment management. There's only one, isn't there?
That's correct.
So your language is unfortunate. Let me point that out.
Thank you.
I got one that's real fun, though, in a minute. You say the same, I don't know if you picked it up, but you say the same thing twice.
Okay.
Paragraph you found. Let me find it for you. On page 24, you have one paragraph, and on page 25, you repeat the paragraph in the same words.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
That's a little unusual. And then on the construction on Greenpoint, you say the library is to maintain a project reserve of at least 2,000. 2,000 what?
Can you repeat that?
your footnote 8 refers to the fact the agreement with the city requires the library to maintain a project reserve of at least $2,000.
It's $2 million.
I think, and then the footnote's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
No, up on the top, Mark, under the heading of the year, it says in thousands.
I know, but that's dollars. There's no dollar sign
There's
here.
no dollar sign.
Okay, I got you.
Hold on. These are all kind of minor things, but at least you get them. Now, you got another one that mystified me on page 21. In the return objectives, you say to accomplish this objective, the endowment seeks to generate total return that we see not only its operating expenses, all the expenses managing it. The operating expenses are the operating expenses of the endowment, not the library. What's the it's referred to?
Yeah, the operating expenses of the endowment.
I would think maybe you ought to make that clearer. And the lawyer in me always would put something in it, and the spending policy, the objective, maintain this is what your objective is. You usually put in something, no assurance that it'll happen, but that's okay. Hold on, a couple more things here. There's a reference on page 27 to the line of, you have a line of credit agreement with a bank, about $3.5 million. And then the library had to maintain then you say maintain a minimum of $50,000 in the category without donor restrictions within net assets. The line of credit was terminated by the client. How does the client extend you the line of credit?
I believe BPL terminated the line of credit.
I don't know who BPL is. So
I'm sorry, the Brooklyn Public Library. That's me. That's us.
Well, you're the client then.
Correct.
So you terminated the line of credit at that time?
Correct.
But it's unclear to me which one you have there. Because
Right.
you have a $3.5 million loan, and then you have a minimum of $50,000 without donor restriction. The line of
So what occurred was when we sought out the line of credit to assist us with the cash flow associated with the capital, the grant managed, the BPL managed capital projects. We went out and we sought out a $15 million line of credit with TD Bank. We had prior to that a line of credit, a smaller line of credit that we could tap into if we ever needed it for operating expenses. However, when we went and we entered into the larger line of credit of 15 million, we terminated the smaller line of credit, and I think that is what the that note is referring to.
No, all right. I couldn't get it out of there. Then in the next one, you say the cash maintained in non-interest bearing accounts current has no limit on federal insurance. You just said it will exceed the insurance. The limit in federal insurance is what, $250,000 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have much more than that in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
So what does this non-interest bearing has no limit on federal insurance mean?
Sorry. I'm going to have to get back to you on that as well.
My guess is you need to change the words.
Okay.
I understand the federal program. It's I don't know. I think it's $250,000 per account, and you just say you have no limit, and that's not, I think, what you want to say.
I think if it's a checking account and it's non-interest bearing is what the issue is.
Well, the interest is nothing. I mean, it's the credit insurance that we're talking about here. And you carry a bank balance well in excess of the federal insurance program. And normally, what's said here is that you look at the credit rating of the banks that you have the money with, and you're satisfied. Something like
Correct.
that. There's some standard language that everybody uses. Again, I wish they had to talk to every constituent agency about using the same words.
I understand. We'll look into it. Thank you.
If I were there, I would hand it a sheet with the number of capitalizations for the city you need, but it's not worth it. One more thing here, if you don't mind. In the supporting services, you talk about fundraising. What is your fundraising as a percentage of the money you raise?
I don't have the number offhand. I can pull it up.
Because there are certain guidelines that the funders tend to use that way, and I just wonder how you fit within those guidelines.
All right.
Are there any other questions?
Well, Mike, I'm not going to bother with this.
Karen, I'd like to thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
You were able to offer some good comments. Have a happy and a healthy holiday. And be safe.
There's one overarching comment I have here, nothing to do with this institution, but I've said it for years. The idea that this group now reviews an already signed off financial statement means that that something's wrong. I just think we should try to structure this differently so we end up with a draft that we can comment on in a meaningful way. I say this every time, recognizing it may be impossible. Do you folks have an audit committee?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm assuming there's no management letter?
Candace?
There was a management letter, but we had no comments to bring to management.
There were no material weaknesses identified.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Next item up on the agenda is the Queens Borough Public Library. Michael?
Good morning. Mike Triali, Chief Financial Officer, Queens Public Library. I'm joined by Ritesh Lal from BDO, Jerry Mizell from BDO. I'm not sure if Keith is with us, Keith Churhan.
He's not with us this morning.
Okay. And Vishnu Dewa, the controller at Queens Public Library. Obviously, we're very similar in size, somewhat to BPL, so I don't want to belabor any of the points. We experience obviously similar issues with this current COVID situation. We've also pivoted to a more digital platform. I just want to share some highlights, based on, I just completed my third year at Queens Public Library. I think we've made a big difference in cleaning up the finances. The library increased the collections budget by $2.9 million last year, and that drove a lot of our increase in e-catalog materials, which are available through our digital platforms. Our long-term investments increased $4.9 million year over year. For the second year in a row, our external auditors did not issue a management recommendation letter. The last time the library did not utilize a line of credit was in fiscal year 11. So this is something, we got rid of that line of credit need. And part of that was our concerns about the state of the finances out there. And obviously, if we were pegged, we'd have a difficulty in paying that line of credit back. So we really got ahead of things financially as we now await to see the end of this downward trend. We sold Mitchell Linden to New York City, resulting in a $1.1 million net gain. The library was closed during the entire last quarter of the fiscal year. Despite this, there was no delay in meeting our financial audit roll-up deadline. the library wrote off 7.7 million of old New York City receivables. That's the old pass-through grant from a prior administration, which was the subject of many negative news stories that I know many of you are familiar with. Due to COVID-19, the library allowed staff to carry over some time, so there was an increase in the compensated absence liability. Due to the COVID-19 library closure, many agencies allowed the library to carry over program revenue, resulting in $1.5 million in increase in deferred revenue. Just to address some of the questions that were raised already, and just to give you a little flavor, in terms of PPE, we spent close to $500,000 last year. This year we have about 900,000 budgeted for PPE, and we spent about 600,000. So this involved the outfitting, the plexiglass partitions, all of the cleaning supplies, the masks. Obviously, public folks coming into our branches are also provided this PPE. So that was something that was clearly a help. We currently have 35 libraries open for to-go service. A number of our branches have been used for testing sites. Ozone Park was temporarily, Windsor Park, Kew Gardens, Hills, and Lefferts currently open as testing sites in a collaboration that QPL is doing with the city. Over 11,000 people were tested in those closed sites. So certainly we are giving back as much as possible, working with the city and trying to support, our main branches as much as possible. There's a great need for digital. In terms of just the overall statistics, we had close to 1.5 million cardholders. Our circulation last year, 8.3 million. Our collections, 4.6 million in our physical collection, over 140,000 digital collection end of 20, and that number is going up based on our investments made. 1.8 million computer sessions, 7.4 in-person visits, 58,000 programs provided, over 1.1 million people attended these programs. Public access computers available was 6,522. Our wireless use was about over 500,000. So just gives you some statistics. I'm going to now turn it over to Ritesh Lal, our BDO auditor, to go over pretty much some other numbers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Ritesh Lal, audit partner from BDO for Queens Public Library. Just some required communications here in connection with the audit. As Mark has pointed out, we have substantially completed the audit as of today. The objective of the audit was to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance. We have issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. All records and information we requested by BDO were freely available from the management team. And the management team cooperation was excellent and during the audit. So we want to thank the management team at Queens Public Library. And as Mike pointed out, we did not note any material weaknesses in connection with the audit. So that's a high-level overview of my required communications. I'll pass it back over to the audit committee members.
Excuse me.
Okay, if there are no other comments, are there any other questions or comments regarding the financial statements? I have a couple of nits. Very minor, but I feel I have to say. On page 26, number 17.
Yes.
In the first sentence, you say you offer 3 deferred comp plans, and then the second sentence, you say the 456B plan, which wasn't mentioned in the first sentence.
So I guess Yeah, I think the way this is reading, Michael, is that the library has 3 retirement plans, of which 2 are 403B and 1 is a 457 plan.
Yeah, we got the 6-7 wrong.
It should be 457.
7, yes.
Right. Mhm.
I agree with that comment because that's okay.
I have some others, and this is always difficult in the sense of how do we get them to you? Because I don't want to tie up everybody's time just going through it. But
Maybe like what we should do is send it on to somebody at the controller's office. I'd like to send mine in too because I have nits and bits like that.
You can mail them into, I'll give you guys the address.
Okay.
And we do try to incorporate your changes from year to year.
Yeah, as Jeremy pointed out, your comments from last year was incorporated into the final product this year.
And as Michael had pointed out, you're still trying to work out the carved out piece for the OPEB.
I think everybody's trying to figure that out.
And I won't make the comment.
And we definitely improved our capitalization.
Can the city give you the whole $100 billion to put into yours to make the city's financials better?
Is that an off balance sheet risk, Michael?
If we can, if I may take you back to page 6, apart from the fact that the city is with a V city, there's a contributed facilities listed here as an asset. But I don't see anything about depreciation. And
I'm sorry, page 6 is the income statement. Are you talking about the balance sheet?
Activities.
The statement of activity, yeah.
And there's a line that's contributed facilities. It looks like $28 million.
Right.
Where's the depreciation?
There is no depreciation here because Queens Library don't own these facilities. These are owned by the city.
So that presumably that depreciation is on the city balance sheet?
I would assume so.
It just looks odd here that you have $28 million worth of something and doesn't get depreciated. All right.
This is consistent with all the library's financial statements. Brooklyn Public has the same contributed facilities services, so they don't own the buildings that they house some of the libraries in.
Where does OPEB show up in your statements? Or do you have it?
Your favorite question, Michael? Mike, I think you had an answer for...
I don't think we have it showing up.
Yeah.
Because as I mentioned before, we were working since you brought this up last year. We've been emailing folks. I know the controller's office was involved with the actuary. So we did try to bring this to light. We still haven't gotten a definitive answer. Once we have that, we'd be happy to update our financials.
Well, I raise that because then the OPEB liability, I'm trying to understand it, for your employees is on the city balance sheet. Can't disappear. So if you have 100 employees and it's $1 million, and OPEB gets a lot more than that, that liability has to go someplace.
I don't disagree with you.
So Mark, if I could, and maybe Raymond has something additional to add to this as well, but we have been in conversations with the actuary office since last year, as Michael mentioned, with regards to this. And based on the actuary's response, we're still not able to tell whether both libraries receive medical benefits from the city. And that's what we're trying to figure out. So until we're able to make that final determination, they won't be included in the evaluation.
Not often I get as confused as I am here now. I'm an employee. I submit a claim for benefit. Somebody pays that. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
So so that's a liability. And unless the city puts it away from itself, presumably it's part of the collection of things that the city pays for.
Mark, I think it's safe to say that the total liability the city has, if there are library employees who are covered by the plan is probably captured in the city. The two difficulties that we're encountering that Jackie alluded to is one, who's actually covered and who's responsible for paying for those benefits. And the second problem is whether or not they meet the criteria to actually report a liability on their own, as opposed to showing in one place, difference between a single employer and multi-employer plan. Sometimes, even if an entity is covered by another plan, they're not necessarily required to report the liability.
Okay.
I can only speak for myself and how I've received a number of inquiries over the last year or two about this, and every single time I've tossed it back and saying, you need to tell me first who's actually covered and who's responsible for paying. And at least from my perspective, I haven't really gotten that answer.
The wonderful magic of accounting. Huh?
One thing I could assure you is what we're paying currently is hitting our fringe benefits. So anything we're currently paying is hitting our financial statement.
Right. No, understood. I think my question is more like who is ultimately responsible for paying? The city.
Oh, I understand.
You might pay.
Understand and appreciate all your support with this.
Listen, the city is the ultimate payer. The only question is whether or not that this segment of the city should have some liability, share that liability, so that the true operating costs of the business can be understood.
Right, but the liability, who books the liability, partly depends on who's ultimately responsible for paying it.
But it's also a question of whose employee is getting the money.
That's the real question. If people are working for the library, do they expect, or is this a given, that they will have an OPEB when they retire?
I think that's complicated by the fact that the city funds some of the employees, but not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's say this.
But you guys are working on this issue.
Yeah. I can just see myself going through a due diligence session on a public offering with an answer to that. It would be a little difficult. Then, if you don't mind, there's a cash flow from investing activities on page 7. You're mixing investments and fixed assets there, because normally the investing activities are the marketable securities and things like this, and you got cash flow from investing activities, and that's not purchase of fixed assets. You're not in the business of purchasing and disposing of fixed assets.
Yeah, Mark, I think it's the direct method of cash flow. So I think under the direct method, I think the disposals and for both fixed assets and investments are in the same caption, but we can circle back with you on that.
It's odd to look at that, particularly since the next one, it says gains on sale of properties. All right, that's that one. Please turn to page 8. The second paragraph says significant reduction in the level of support provided to the city if this were to occur. That's an odd way of saying it, but all right. Any of the funding sources may, at its discretion, that's a singular, but all right, again. Let me see. If you will look on page 9, the first paragraph of investments at fair value, last sentence, purchase and sales are recorded. I think that should be of securities.
That's correct.
That could be a little better. Then the level consists under the reported. One of the things would be nice if the way in which each of these constituent organizations described all these things should, but then there's an accounts. It says counts, grants, and contracts are recorded at a reimbursable or contracted amount and do not bear interest. What is that? And do not bear interest.
So the account receivable are not financing receivables, so they don't bear interest on them. They're non-interest bearing receivables. That's what it means.
I understand that, but who has interest bearing receivables?
I think it's just a disclosure.
I know, but I'm not accustomed to seeing receivables. Usually you have receivables and a recording for bad debts or something like that. But I've never seen something where you say that your receivables bear interest.
We can modify the language as a subsequent point.
At least I'm not accustomed to seeing it. Now, there's a $2.3 million allowance. I didn't take the time to go back. As a percentage of what's on the balance sheet, how much is that? It's a big allowance.
Vishnu, do you have that number? I'm sorry, Mark. I don't have that number available in front of me right now.
I'm trying to figure out how material it is. I don't remember, but I think it's a big number in relationship.
Grants receivable on the balance sheet is $6.5 million, which is a net number.
Is that a net of the reserve?
That's net.
So it's 25% of the receivable is not collectible.
Well, 25% of the gross receivable is not collectible.
Okay, it's a big number. That's what I was interested in. Why is that? Is that because the city isn't paying?
I believe part of that is revenue that we did not receive from the state operating fund.
They're notoriously slow.
We didn't get about 20% of our $5.5 million state operating amount yet. So I think it's about 1.2, 1.3 million just for that. And I think there may be some other smaller grants that make up the balance.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
And the state said that that's not a cut. They haven't formally acknowledged that it's a cut. But we put it on the books to play it safe.
This has been around a long time, these kind of receivables in the state and many other areas. Now it's paper. If you don't mind, please turn to page 11. The library occupies at below market rent. How significant is that dollar amount below market rent?
Michael, do you have that information handy?
Is it material?
Vishnu may have it. I don't have that handy.
I'm sorry, I don't have that information handy.
Just so you're aware that they have the receivable, they have the income and expense on the book. It's a wash, right? This is the city gives them the buildings here.
Well, you say that you pay them below market rent, and I'm just curious how much that is.
Oh, in addition, never mind. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mark. I don't have that information available right now.
Well, it's if it's material, then the number may ought to be disclosed.
I don't believe it is that material. I mean, there's only a few facilities that they're paying rent for. So,
okay. Well, by not saying it, you're saying that. Okay. Now, in fixed assets, I guess you told me this, that you don't depreciate them. Is that it?
The contributed
facilities.
Yeah.
The fixed assets owned by the library are depreciated.
Undepreciated. Okay. And who takes care of the repairs and maintenance on those assets?
The library that owns the properties, they take care of the repairs and maintenance.
Okay, so if I took a look at the depreciation account, if it's proper, I could probably figure out what the maintenance is. How material is this?
Michael, do you know how much repairs and maintenance?
This is Vishnu speaking from the library. The maintenance on fixed asset is not a material amount.
Okay.
We expense it as we pay it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would not be included in the depreciation expense. So if you look on page 25, the breakout of the functional expense schedule.
Okay.
Depreciation for the year was about 1.7 million.
That always gets into the question that, well, how well maintained the stuff is, but all right, recovery of assets. Some language here, but all right. Now, why are you, when you describe, I can never, NIMF, whatever it is, why do you mention the fact that it's a modified version of the Uniform Prudent Management Institutional Funds?
Because New York took the original law and modified it a little bit.
I know that, but why do we? What's the purpose of describing it?
Because it governs how the endowment operates.
No, but that, forgive me, the New York law governs it, right?
Right.
So what's the relevance of describing where it came from?
It's just some background information on what governs the endowment.
Mm-hmm. Where I come from, you don't. I asked about the collateral. On page 13, there's a reference to contingent assets. What are contingent assets?
I'm sorry, what
Page 13, use of estimates. It says, as well as disclosure of contingent assets. What are contingent assets?
I think those are some more generic language, Mark, that's included in the footnote. So
if I ask you how many dollars is that, or what would I know?
I think that's just a generic language for the estimates footnote, Mark. We can modify that going forward.
Now, in risks and uncertainties, you say the library investment funds, investments are generally exposed to various risks. That's fine. Interest rate, credit, and overall market volatility. What about individual stock performance?
We can add that if you like.
You want to go into you may have one that went way up and way down.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and forgive me, some more little thinky stuff. On page 14, you talk about in the end of the first paragraph on utility response. What's that?
So these are just describing some of the, some additional expenses that the library may incur as a result of the COVID-19.
No, but explain to me, what is a utility response? I just didn't understand it.
Yeah, I think those are more like, those are some more generic the disclosures there, Mark. So on the general...
We certainly take these around our firm all over. I've never seen utility response. You're saying that the telephone...
That be an HVAC system, Ritesh?
Yeah, it could be part of the maintenance, yes.
Well, it's not clear. All right, the COVID thing is... why aren't you going for the loans under the Paycheck Protection Program? You don't qualify?
We didn't really want to take that risk. So obviously, we're getting funded. Obviously, if we were to experience some type of dramatic budget reduction, I think it would have opened things up for us.
So you made a management decision that you wouldn't do it. Okay. I'm slowly but surely getting to the end, fellas. On page 17, you talk about a carve out from the line of credit. So that the carve out means that you said that of the line of credit, you had devoted $2 odd million to its workman's compensation.
That's because we're self-insured, and we need that as part of our workers' compensation covenant.
Oh, okay.
Mark, you brought this up last year, so we made this change for you.
You know what? As I've gotten older, I can't remember from one day to the next.
No. All your comments from last year were made this year. So
I always hammer our auditors to ensure they're addressing all of your capitalizations and other recommendations.
See, Mark, somebody's listening to you.
These things are painful to read. So, you get to the line of credit on page 19 and you don't cross-reference the fact that $2 million is tied up, but it's there. So the line of credit from the now it says borrowings under the line of credit. Is that really true that you got a lien on all of your assets for the line of credit? That'd be very unusual.
No, Mark, this is Vishnu from the library. It's just the investment portion on the balance sheet.
So you're saying your investments are the collateral for
That's correct.
Well, maybe you ought to say that.
We can make that change.
That's unusual. The OPEB question. I'm about done, folks. Mike made the comment already.
The workers' comp line of credit is different than the $10 million line of credit?
Yes, the 10 mil. As I mentioned, this is the first time since 2011 we haven't needed a line of credit. So in the past, obviously they utilized the big portion of that line of credit, especially at the end of June, when the cash flow is depleted for like the rollover payroll, the payroll that hits the new fiscal year. Pretty much it was used to support it. So, for many years, I think a couple of years ago, it was close to $8 million, that line of credit. So we've really clamped down. We've improved our cash flow monitoring to ensure that we could do a better job with the cash we're receiving. And, it really paid dividends for us this year because we used to have our money from the city front loaded, upwards of 30 million, let's say, in the first couple of months. This year, that's not happening as a result of the financial situation. We're pretty much on a $9.5 million a month allowance. So this has really helped us prepare for this year as we're facing a lot of uncertainty moving forward.
That's an interesting description of what should go in the effect of the COVID.
I guess what I'm really talking about is the top of page 27, where you're talking about the letter of credit that went to the state, and that's backed up by the other $10 million letter of credit.
Hi, Michael. This is Vishnu. We only have one $10 million line of credit. A portion of that is carved out to support the workers' comp. About 1.6 million, 7 million.
Well, okay.
We actually have a document. It's a one-page covenant. So we could share that if that helps with this.
No, that's right.
There were no management comments or no material weaknesses.
There were no material weaknesses.
Okay. And just to follow up on another question, does Queens have an audit committee?
Yes.
Okay. if there are no other questions or comments, and we'll try to gather them and get them to the Katrina, who is the secretary, to forward on to you. I'd like to thank you for coming, and great presentation, and wishing you all be safe and be well and have a good holiday.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Happy holiday to all and a happy new year.
Take care.
May it be better than this year.
Yes.
Let's hope so.
Yes.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
At this time, I'd like to go in, have a motion to go into executive session.
Motion to go into executive session.
Seconded.
Can I just confirm?
Well, we're doing that. If we ever asked do a presentation on their security?
We are live.
If we weren't live, well, Raymond will fill you in when we're no longer live.
Okay.
That's a lot of stuff.
We're in public session.
Okay, we're now out of executive session and into public session. If there is no other business before the audit committee, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Opposed.
Thank you. And once again, be safe and be well, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.